there was somebody I was selling to. So I would go to her house, and that was fine for a few months. But of course, she ran out of money. Why wouldn't she? Lost her job, but she still had a daughter. She was so desperate for another pill that, like, when she was out of money, she would call me over there, try to wheedle me down, try to get me lower, and she would eventually, start offering me her daughter. Everything I talk about in this video, do not do it. Do not follow in my footsteps. This is not an instructional. If you try to do any of this stuff, it will not end well for you. You will get caught and you will end up in jail. The reason I got away with it, it was a different time. I got lucky. I had the right talent and the right appearance, and the DA hadn't cracked down on it as hard as they do now. Don't do this. This is not about showing you how to do this. This is about showing people what it's really like. So don't. I'll just start with how I got into it. Basically, like most people did, I got into this through family. I was like 14. My mother had so many disabilities. She had a lot of OxyContin that she got prescription every month, and she would sell them. And because she wasn't strong enough to go out there and sell them herself, she would just send me on a little bike. So, 14-year-old kid, I knew what I was doing. I knew that I had envelope of pills, take them down 3 blocks over to the other elderly, disabled people who in town who needed them more or had more money or whatever the hell. And after about a few months of doing that, I kind of met a lot of people, like 2 or 3 dozen people by the time I stopped, of elderly people, disabled people, whoever had these pills and was either willing to sell them or buy them. Usually sell because, they can't make any money, can't live like that. Excuse my language. But they also didn't really want to associate with the criminal types, and I don't look like a criminal type at that time. I'm 15-year-old, blonde hair, blue eyes, totally innocent looking kid. Never even spoke to a cop while I was doing this. And because I had that innocent look, they trusted me. It didn't feel to them like they were doing something illegal. It kind of blossomed from there really, really quickly. Because I had this big source, essentially, of getting these pills. I could get them at pretty good prices. I pretty quickly came into contact with people who do sell them on the street, because I couldn't sell all those on my own. There weren't enough, people in this little 3 dozen community that I worked with. So I would go to these people like 1 a day, sometimes 2 a day. So it was always opiates. Those were the only things I really sold. At the time, the prices were kind of high, so it was like I'd pay them $12. I'd take it to the street dealer, and he'd pay me $15, $16, and he'd resell it for like $20 per pill. And that's kind of how the chain worked. By the time I'm like 17, 18, I've kind of turned this into a little business. I was making like, it doesn't seem like the margins are that large. Like I would make like $3, $4 off every pill, but I was moving like hundreds every month. So I was making at least $1,000 a month. I got a little deeper into it. I would start selling myself to people because I had the, cut out the middleman, right? And that's kind of where I saw the worst stuff, because opiates will never do an opiate, even if a doctor, especially if a doctor prescribes it to you, because it totally destroys you. You can't, if you take it like an OxyContin one a day for like 2 weeks, you just can't feel joy anymore. Nothing feels good except more pill. And that just makes people so desperate. It gets really bad, actually. The things that people will do for one more hit. One thing that really stuck out to me was there was somebody I was selling to. So I would go to her house, and that was fine for a few months. But of course, she ran out of money. Why wouldn't she? Lost her job, but she still had a daughter. And she was so desperate for another pill that, like, when she was out of money, she would call me over there, try to wheedle me down, try to get me lower, and she would eventually, start offering me her daughter. And I'm like, no. At that point, I walked out of there. I told her, I know a guy who can get you heroin if you really need to go cheaper, but I don't touch that stuff myself. I don't deal in that. That's on you. And there were a lot of situations like that where these people were so controlled by this drug. It was the only thing that they cared about anymore. And people have tried to rob me. People have been desperate enough that they feel they have no recourse but to, point a gun at me. And, I'd like to say I'm hardcore and that I fought back on those times. There were times I tried. I'm not a good fighter. I'm not hardcore. I'm not the picture. I'm not the stereotype of a criminal drug dealer. I lost. I gave up my stuff. I lost a lot of money that way. And, like, again, you can't ask the police for help. So I was visiting with somebody who was selling to me, and their, I guess, demented husband, like, busted down the front door and started he had a shotgun. I don't know what it was. And he just started opening up into the building like a fucking maniac. And I was, like, stuck right next to the door as this guy was starting to come in. And I made the dumb decision to lean across the doorway and try and grab the door and slam it closed. And I picked the wrong millisecond to do that, I guess. And it was a super weird feeling of it was like somebody turned on or, like, opened an oven right next to me, and I could feel the hot air passing over. And I knew he had hit me then, but I just closed the door, hit the deadbolt with my now good arm, and fucking booked it out the back door and got, like, 2 blocks before I even, like, stopped and, like, oh my god. Holy shit, that's... Oh god, that's... Hang on a second. I'm fine. I'm gonna sit down a minute. You think it's easy to talk about until it isn't. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that stuck with me pretty hard. That just like I said, it feels easy to talk about, especially in this where it doesn't feel quite as real. You got all these nice shiny distractions, but stuff like that was the motivating factor in me really getting out. That was like I realized I was in over my head. I was still that 14-year-old kid on a bicycle running around, and I was just pretending like I was more than that. My mother, she was one of those people who went off the deep end way before I started trying to help her. She, there was nothing in her life anymore but drugs. It was just all about, I want to be high off my ass and laying on the floor somewhere where I don't have to think. And I could try and argue with her, but there was no point. Once it gets control of you like that, it's over. Nobody takes drugs for no reason. They get addicted to these things because they feel terrible in the first place. They're depressed. They're in a stressful situation. They can't handle life. And the best way to get out of drugs is to get yourself out of that situation. Make it so you don't need drugs anymore. And that's the best trick to getting out of that. There was a moment, just like a little after I was turning 18, or like not a moment, but like a period of a few months where I was starting to get sucked into the wider world. I was starting to get to know a lot of people that maybe aren't that great to know, and kind of getting involved in some of the wider black market criminal community, as I like to call it. And I saw some very terrible things there, but I don't know if I'm comfortable mentioning them for multiple reasons. I could sell somebody 5 pills, $60, $100, whatever it was that time of day, that time of year, and they would just immediately. And like, that's enough to overdose. What can I do but walk away? Like, do I call 911 and tell them I just sold somebody pills and they just overdosed on them? No, that's a quick way to go to jail. And a lot of people don't realize that's kind of the dilemma in these communities when you're doing this for a living. You can't rely on the police anymore. You can't rely on 911. The famous phrase "snitches get stitches." That's not because criminals will mess with you if you tell the police. The police will mess with you. If you tell the police anything, there's like a 50% chance they do nothing. It's like a 20% chance they you over instead. They arrest you, and the rest is just maybe they do something, maybe they don't. But are you really making a difference? So it's just there's never any benefit in it for you to snitch, to talk to cops. There's never any benefit in it for anyone. And that's why that phrase exists. But then it got twisted all out of proportion by rappers, by media, by everybody. And now it means that like you got to stay quiet or the gank squads will come after you. That doesn't happen. Everybody minds their own business. Most crimes have no victim. They're all about people trying to make ends meet and working together to make that happen. That's the reason gangs exist, kind of for that backup to replace what you lose when you can no longer trust the police. You can no longer trust ambulances and fire to come to the rescues whenever you get in trouble. You need to get friends that are willing to back you up like that. I never really got that. I never, I had a couple of people I could count on like that, and that was that. And that was one of the big reasons why I couldn't stay around. I couldn't really go big time. And I had the opportunities. Like I knew people, and they were like, "Hey, you get around. You clearly know a lot of people. You clearly have that innocent charisma I always had." And they would try to get me to buy in bulk and resell it. And I think I made the right choice in staying out of that. I did my thing where I kind of don't. What I did for the most part was buy from people who wouldn't have been able to make ends meet otherwise. They were desperate. They needed to make money somehow, and I would help them out there. I would keep them safe. They weren't getting involved in all of that themselves. They just worked through me. And that part I don't think was bad, really, because although, of course, it's illegal to do that, I don't think it was morally wrong, because those people needed help. They had no other choice. And I gave them the help they needed, and I always gave them a fair price, always kept them safe. They were never in danger at any point. Like, why would you ruin that when that pays your bills and it pays my bills and nobody's getting screwed, right? But the part of reselling it, I'm not proud of that. I had part in the trade of what I still genuinely believe to be the most evil shit on earth, which is opiates. But again, I was a kid. I couldn't work normally. I couldn't go find a job throwing newspapers. I was too young for even that. And I had to find a way to help my mom pay the bills and help her get the pills she needed to not, be miserable. My mother, there was nothing more I can do for her, she was really, abused drugs her whole life, every kind of drug you can imagine, and her body was just totally falling apart. She needed all kinds of help. One day in my early 20s, I had invested in a vehicle, I had enough money that I could go in with a house on some friends in another state, and I just got out of town, didn't tell anybody. Got my mom set up somewhere in an elderly home because she was gone at that point. I couldn't do nothing for her. Just left town, threw my old cell phone out the window, and just split to another state and never heard from any of it again. And that's how I got out of it. The whole story from when I got in to when I got out. I kept up with some of the people I worked with on like Facebook. I didn't interact with them. I just kind of watched them from afar, and I don't think anybody I worked with directly is still alive. So I definitely made the right decision in getting out, huh? But the guy I worked with primarily was House. That was what everybody called him. He had House tattooed across his chest. Prison tattoo, obviously. He'd been to prison like 3 times. He was always high on something. He would always have a bottle of vodka with him, and like 6 years ago, he just drove a car straight through a house and died. And that's how he went out. Yeah, House died by driving a car through a house. Ironic, right? Nobody ever came after me. Nobody ever looked. I've talked about this before in pretty public places and not gotten anybody coming after me for it. I never got the police. And now I feel like I'm confident enough to talk to you about it and maybe get a little bit of a platform, maybe let people know what it looks like, that all these criminals, these drug dealers, these car thieves, I knew some people who did that. They would scrap cars. All of these people are normal people that were trying to pay their bills, right? They weren't born criminals. They're stuck there because they can't get out. They can't get a real job. Their families hold them in it. Their gangs hold them in it. And but they're still normal people. They got rent to pay. They have to buy food for their kids. And that's how they do it. Because of the way that this stuff works with the guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy, all the way up the chain, it's practically guaranteed that like everybody who watches this knows somebody who does that, who is involved in that. And that person is probably scared to talk about it, even though they might have had some horrible experiences, some things that mess them up, but they can't talk about it because who do you ask for help? Who do you talk to about that stuff, People are everywhere doing this stuff, trying to make ends meet. And, it's not a great way to make ends meet, but you gotta pay your bills somehow, don't you? So, yeah, if you have a friend like that who's in a bad situation, who's doing bad things, then you could make a difference by extending an olive branch. Like, I wouldn't have gotten out of there without my friends who I still live with, who we all went in on a house together and, paid half the down payment and they paid the rest, and we all go in on the mortgage. And that's without friends that were outside of that circle, I couldn't have gotten out. So that's part of what I'm hoping for, is maybe I can humanize people like that and, get them a little more accepted. I don't make as much money now as I did then, which is, not a great thing to say about yourself when you were 14 years old, but, it was the right choice. I would say that most people don't get out of it, and I was smarter than most people who were in it, but it's not about smarts. It's just it doesn't, when you're all the way in on it, it doesn't feel like you're doing something illegal. It doesn't feel like you're doing something that's risking your life, that you could get caught tomorrow and go to jail, and your life's now you're just stuck being a criminal because nobody else will hire you. And that could happen at any time. But when you go on such a long streak, like I said, I never got searched by cops. I never got harassed because I'm white, blonde hair, blue eyes. I look innocent, like picturesque innocence. But that was lucky, and if I didn't have that trait, then I would be screwed. I would definitely be in jail right now and probably not have gotten out of that. And it really pulls you in like that, because once you get that hubris, that I've got a system going, this is never going to go wrong, it always does. Even the people who were like me, who were white, clean cut, looked innocent, the people like that I knew, they didn't stay out of jail either. So I got super lucky lasting for 10 years, and I shouldn't have tried. I should have gotten out as soon as I could.
If you want to help support the channel, then please consider subscribing. It only takes 1 second and it really does help a lot. And if you enjoyed this video, then maybe leave a like and a comment. If you'd like to be a part of my community, you should join the Discord and follow me on Twitter. Links are down in the description below.